How's everybody doing today? How's everybody been? Hopefully everybody's been good. Hopefully everybody's been applying these things to their lives and doing other things that similar to that. So yeah, I'm just gonna make this video just because I have to make a video. I haven't realistically made one in a while. Not because I don't know what to talk about, but it's just, like I said, I don't know. But yeah, so I had to make this video just because Christ can remind me of it. And that was essentially it. Right now, I forgot what I was actually going to talk about. So I'm just obviously going to recap about the other past things that I actually have been talking about in the last videos. So obviously, it's just the worksmen on the table, still doing the slates and the etching on the slates to ensure each one comes perfect. And that's the results that you're going to end up seeing because you're not falling into sin right now. And it's realistically that simple. People don't really grasp it at that extent at that point. I mean, they're more or less really worried about the future, and they're not really able to discern what Christ is actually, putting these things and reminding them of these things, what the purpose for those sort of emotions actually are. So you obviously become prudent. You pray about these things, but definitely if you haven't even bothered actually, preparing yourselves and praying for the things that you typically worry about, you haven't even made it into a habit. You're not realistically going to equate that right away, but you obviously have that way of thinking inside of your head that you automatically want to apply it to your life, that you're a worksman on the table. I'm not in sin right now. I mean, this is pretty simple concepts to be able to grasp and to be able to understand, but it is obviously your impulses and your natural, how you realistically react to certain situations are going to be the reasons why you're not going to be able to see the results that I was seeing, and that you want to see. How you generally cope with certain situations is realistically going to determine what kind of results that you actually see. So, obviously that emphasizes, the main issue and the problems of your life. It's just realistically how you're handling situations, and you're not realistically handling them at, as a mature adult, as a grown-up adult, and that obviously has to deal with so many other different types of suffrages that you just welcome inside of your life, and you just let in just through those exact ways of thinking, just because it's all psychologically and not even psychological, but realistically psychologists have some sort of knowledge to an extent onto why people react the way that they do and certain things like that. But for the most part, obviously this is beyond psychology, just because it actually addresses the spiritual issues and actually has to deal with the things that are spiritual. Psychology doesn't address any of those things. All of it has to do with carnal means. They give you pills for those sort of things, but realistically the issue in itself is 100% demonic. So hopefully, you're able to detach yourself from, what you actually have learned all of your life. I already have come to a knowledge and understanding that all of your life, you've just been accustomed to looking at the secular life, being able to recognize that this is truth to you. But in reality, you obviously were not existing in God's truth, and you were existing outside of that. And because of that, that's why you live your life the way that you lived. And you smoked weed, you did this, you did that, you looked at Hollywood differently. You were just like, wow, this is Hollywood. I can't believe they make such good music, without realistically really being able to view it through the spiritual eyes that you need to be seeing it. They're obviously, what's that word? They're obviously spreading the cursing and just sexual perversion, immorality, fornication, adultery, selling drugs, murder. All these things themselves have to deal with the works of the flesh. You know them very well because you're a Christian. These are just very simple concepts that you already have understood because you got saved, and you realize that you have to be able to be obedient to everything and anything that your parents teach you. So that's just something that is just normal to you, right? It's something that you have just commonly accepted as your way of living and your way of life, and you realistically don't have to worry about anything else of, what anyone else has to say about your lifestyle or what you choose to do, right? You obviously have a judge, and because of that, you hearken to that way of thinking. But more often than not, because of the whole element of friends and friendship itself, you let certain individuals influence your decisions when in all reality you need to be letting Christ influence all of your decisions to ensure that you are always applying Christ's commandments to these scenarios and situations that come in your life. But in all honesty, that's the main issue also with, baby Christians, in all honesty, is just they let the wrong influencers influence them, when in reality, there's gonna come a time in your life where you realistically are gonna have to, think for yourselves, and really, deviate yourself from that path, and really worry about your own family and your own children. You're not gonna be worried about what the validation of your friends, and certain things like that realistically many people just typically are more susceptible to the tactics and strategies of the devil, just because of that, because that's what they're after. Or maybe they're not after it, maybe it's just in a different form, right? But for the most part, because of that way of thinking, it definitely influences their decisions on why they actually act the way that they do. So hopefully, yeah, you're actually able to, understand that most of your problems just come from your way of thinking and how you actually are handling certain situations. You aren't realistically able to discern it at that level, that there's just no alternative to any of Christ's commandments and any of Christ's teachings. And to you, it's just like, well, whatever the option of choice is there, but it's all an illusion. You automatically know what's going to happen if you choose the wrong way and the wrong path. You can end up going into the lake of fire, and that's it. But you don't view it like that. You justify yourselves way too much, and because of that, you end up doing what? You end up just backsliding, degenerating, and next thing you know, you're not even anything remotely Christian like, which was what I was actually going to address in this video. Is the main reasons why so many Christians end up backsliding is because they just justify themselves way too much. If you are willing to let God be God and let Him actually function and direct your life, then obviously you're not going to justify a single thing in your life, your actions, your ways of thinking, your logic, and these sort of things themselves, to be able to, dictate or, determine what your actual judgments are going to be, or how you're going to react to certain, situations, or how you handle them. And yeah, that just seems to be the main issue, as well as that once they realistically really let go of that justification, mentality, and also victim mentality, whatever, then that's when there's so much more room for them to actually grow. That's when they realistically really do mature, where growth really comes in. And obviously, Christ is really able to, mold these individuals like clay, to be able to maneuver them in this earth, and to be able to, really ground them, and really be able to ensure that they're fruitful and then bear a lot of fruit, that the Father is glorified. But, that's just something that I oftentimes just realize, right? But I didn't even bother putting it in the video. It's something that I realized, that the main reasons why I wasn't seeing as much growth or maturity in my life was because I just justified myself way too much. And because I justified myself way too much, I didn't leave any room for Christ to actually be able to function or move in my life. And I would just be like, well, I don't think it's a sin like that. And, this is just how I live my life, or I've been acting like this. I've been dealing with these sort of situations in the same exact manner all of my life, right? And in reality, it wasn't until I realistically really detach myself from that way of thinking, that justification and justifying myself that I wasn't in sin, that I was finally able to really reflect on my actions and decisions, to be able to decide within myself that obviously these are very reckless behaviors, and these are, blatant sins and obvious sins. And you're gonna operate the same exact way. Christ is not a respecter of persons. Everyone is being judged on the same exact principles. The devils themselves already know how they're actually able to. I'm not the first person that's done this as a Christian. There's been plenty of Christians who continue living this way of thinking, only to be thrown into hell. And obviously this is a form of it. This is a sin, right? This is an iniquity of the heart, that you just continue justifying yourselves and your actions, and refusing to really submit yourselves to Christ and His authority. So it is rebellion, it's obvious rebellion, justification, but the fact that it comes in the form of justification is almost impossible to get a person out of it until they're finally able to recognize that, and to accept that they need to change. And some of these people will never be ready to accept those certain things, just because of what their foundation is already built on. It's built on, some of the destructive habits are going to end up throwing them into hell. And if it causes them to, confess that they actually are wrong, then that means that in their minds, they're going to end up going into hell. And in reality, that's what's going to send them there, if they fully, commit themselves to the thoughts that they actually have and follow through with them. then 100% was going to happen. They're obviously going to, return back to their right mind and be like, wait, what the heck? What am I thinking about? Why do I think like this? And, there's just been way too many instances in my life that I was, I had those same exact moments where I was just like, what the? I was like, man, I can't believe I really thought like that. And, and that's essentially, what Christ, wanted me to really get across, that I really have to follow through with certain, thoughts of mine and certain destructive habits of mine to really be able to wake up and return back to my right mind. I already understand. I already been on that path as well. For me to not be willing to accept that any of those, hurtful types of messages of Christ actually telling me that He hates me or that I'm an abomination and certain things like that. You don't want to believe those certain things, but because of God's person and authority, He has nothing to prove to anyone. Sometimes you have no choice but to believe those messages are strictly for you and that they apply to you to an extent, in some way, shape, or form. I mean, when he was telling me these things, I was smoking weed, I was, drinking, I was smoking cigarettes, and I was just like, wow, I can't believe that there's no way this is God. And, I was just thinking in this way of thinking, like, I just don't believe it. I can't. But these are obvious sins to you. I wasn't fornication or whatever, committing adultery and lusting after women. I was in this way of thinking, and I just didn't want to believe that, Christ is actually telling me these things. But this is how blind I essentially was, to these certain, messages of Christ, and, that everybody comes across, right? But, I was actually able to, finally be willing to accept that those messages were for me. And now it's as obvious as it was to you when I actually told you these things, that obviously it's clear, right? That message was for me. But, sadly, there's many Christians that don't want to accept that Christ sees them as an abomination for not obeying the law of Moses, for not, stopping their abominations in short, and doing certain things like that. And, to me is obvious now because I'm willing to want to be obedient to God more. That I know it's not just, the commandments of Jesus Christ and the law of Moses itself. I know what obedience really is. It's realistically not eating from the tree of knowledge, and that's realistically to the point that the extent that I'm actually able to understand and realize, that's how I need to really live my life. Whatever Christ tells me not to do, that's it. I don't have a choice. These are just commandments from, the word of God. I mean, the mouth of God. These are just his very commands that come out of his mouth. And so I realistically, because I'm born in this life and I'm born in this created world, I have no choice for me to be able to, decide for myself to whether to obey or to disobey any of those commandments themselves. I mean, in all honesty, even the input in Christ, when Christ actually does ask you, or if he doesn't ask you, those in themselves are forms and variations of sins themselves. I mean, you can add a twist to it because of wisdom, because if you're judging certain situations, but for the most part, what he tells you to do, if he tells you to engage in spiritual warfare, it's a commandment, and you're going to have to engage in spiritual warfare. It's not how you view these things and not how you see them. I don't feel like I don't feel personally led to engage myself in spiritual warfare. I don't feel personally led to give up pork or shrimp. I feel like, but if it makes my brother stumble, then I'll stop 100%. Obviously, a sin is a sin, right? When is it going to stop being a sin? Not because Christ said it. Christ doesn't have that level of authority to be able to say that sins aren't sins anymore. You're going to not eat pork for the rest of forever, so you need to get over it immediately, even if you ended up making it after your rebellion, uh, and rebellious heart. But in all honesty, these are just very basic common principles. To not love your neighbor is a sin forever. To, what else? And it's not even the fact that Christ would tell individuals to not hate your enemies, but to love your enemies instead. It was the fact that it covered the wrong with the good. And that was the whole issue and the whole reasons as to why his commandments were above that level of authority. Getting rid of certain sins and certain aspects of sins, what obviously is not going to happen because it doesn't agree with God's person whatsoever. That's like saying God is okay with you committing fornication because he commanded you to do it. He's not going to command you to commit fornication at any point. All those things themselves have to deal with, sins in their entirety, and that's it, and there's no way around it. God is holy and sins are not, right? And those are pretty simple basic principles that everybody can be able to grasp, but it's the whole justification where individuals just begin justifying their actions when there's clearly sins How many times have you justified fornication when it was clearly a sin just because you were in love with that person, or for whatever other reason you just didn't see it as a sin? Everybody's doing it, or just certain things like that. How wrong were you when you finally were able to open your eyes and see how foolish you were and believe in those ways of thinking? I mean, these things are pretty obvious and pretty clear for you to be able to discern that you realistically don't have that level of knowledge or intellect to be able to discern every single sin like that. You don't have, you're not that intelligent, right? You're basically being led by Christ. Christ is your shepherd. He's the one that's leading you to waters of life for you to ensure that you actually live to green pastures, like it's written in Psalms 23. And apart from him, you can't do a single thing. Realistically, you're like a dumb sheep. You can't do a single thing without Christ's help, without Christ's direction to be able to tell you this is the way, this is where you need to essentially go, because this is where clean water is at. And even then, you're gonna have to actually be able to recognize the nature of a sheep to be realistically be able to recognize how docile you really are and how how stupid you essentially are. And until you realistically get to that point for you to be able to acknowledge, that that's the extent that Christ sees you in, and that's how he sees you as. He sees you as a literal sheep. Then you'll be able to recognize and know your place for sure and for certain. That I don't know as much as I think. My parents taught me this and that. That's perfectly fine. You use that as a good foundation, and then obviously use Christ's teachings as a better foundation, right? Atop of that one. So atop the foundation of Christ, and then whatever your mom and dad taught you that were good principles. I mean, these are pretty simple, basic things to understand. That's just your own wisdom, how you're actually able to apply these things to your life. Christ's teachings as well as your parents' teachings, and just know what life taught you. Common sense, certain things like that. And I mean, they're just basics and principle. I mean, simple concepts and principles to be able to understand. Yeah, sorry. But yeah. So grace and peace be multiplied to you. The grace is to know what I'm saying, the peace to know that it's sent from God, and the mercies to be able to receive these messages, and the love of the Lord Jesus Christ, and the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ reign in your hearts and be with you all. So yeah, so no, honestly, this it's just so simple. Once you're actually willing to admit that you're wrong, and you definitely are more wrong than you think, then you're actually going to leave so much more room for change in your life. You're going to stop obviously relying on your own intellect and your own knowledge of what is good and bad and good and evil. Well, I mean, it's pretty simple. It's just you not being able to discern the evils that are in your life, or you realistically, this is the real reason, you realistically don't have wisdom in your life to be able to apply. You know, you don't know how to cope with these certain situations that come inside of your life, which are, wise things, wisdom, and, certain proverbs like that in Psalms. That's the main issue. That's the whole problem. It's not to say that you yourself are just inept, or you're just volatile of all dependency and whatever else, and you can't be independent at any point whatsoever. I mean, part of your independence is you actually picking up the Bible and reading the Proverbs that is actually able to teach you what is wisdom, and how to actually be able to apply certain um, proverbs and verses to just your life. And that in itself is actually able to teach you, your destructive habits, how you realistically were living this sort of lifestyle that was very unfulfilling. You thought that you were living this super free lifestyle because you were actually able to choose, or you didn't view it as certain sins. But in all reality, the real freeing lifestyle is the one that doesn't involve demons in it, because of the demon's destructive nature. They're trying to destroy you, they're trying to kill you, they're trying to ruin your life and just make you miserable. And that's truly freeing. And smoking a cigarette comes with demons. Getting drunk all the time comes with demons. Getting drunk period comes with demons. And doing certain things like that, obviously there's no fulfillment of life whatsoever in any of those actions, just because of the demons that are attached to them. Marijuana, fornication, there's absolutely, it just sucks the life out of every single thing that you essentially do, because there are sins, and because of God's judgments that comes inside of your life. There is absolutely not free whatsoever. You're in bondage. But on the contrary, obviously, what's the opposite of that? If you actually do, obey and follow righteousness, then obviously you have a freeing life away from those sort of devils and those demonic, activities and presences that are inside of your life, because you're not dealing with anything that has to do with sin, right? No pork, you're gonna get cancer. I mean, it's pretty simple. concept to be able to understand. Just because you eat plastic, you don't know what plastic actually does to you. You're gonna end up getting kidney cancer, or if that's possible, and certain things like that. But that just seems to be the main issue, in all honesty, is the fact that people aren't realistically able to cope with these certain situations in their life. They're very ignorant about how to be what wisdom and wise things actually are, and how to be able to cope with those certain situations. And because of that, they're not realistically centered around just looking for wise things, looking for wisdom, and applying those good advice and counsels to their life. They're more or less just focused on the sins and getting rid of all the sins. That in itself is going to end up completely destroying them, and you know distracting them from just realistically being able to accumulate so much knowledge of wisdom, and proverbs and wise sayings themselves, which is the overall premise. I obviously don't want at all at any point for you to realistically focus on, all of your flaws and imperfections and the sins that you don't view as sins. I obviously want you to focus on wise things, wisdom, proverbs, and just realistically accumulating as much knowledge as you possibly can on what is wisdom, how to be able to cope with these certain situations that are going to come inside of everyone's life, because these are spirit. Once you actually realistically begin to just focus completely on the flesh, you're not that realistically that experienced to be able to know where it's going to lead you. You obviously have that sort of drive in your heart to be able to ensure to get rid of every single one of these sins, but it's going to lead you on another on another path, right? It's going to lead you astray. You're going to be thinking that this is something that Christ himself wants you to do, because he wants you to be knowledgeably what is it, just what's that word, to be knowledgeable on the sins and what they actually are. To an extent, I mean, these things are pretty simple concepts, to be able to grasp what's going to happen if you realistically just focus on sins. It's going to end up destroying you. You're going to get so overwhelmed, and you're just going to be like, wow, you're going to get lost in this vortex, in short. And when you actually focus on wisdom, you actually have more of a focus, and you're more centered on what you realistically need to be doing and should be doing. You have a means to be able to really be cope with these certain scenarios and situations in your life. There's a crutch, or there's something to fall back on, besides you just being so focused and enveloped in the sins and what you could obviously fall into, which is would be one of the main issues as to why I'm saying this to begin with, is to prevent that entirely, because I already know what it's like. Christ was doing the same thing with me, just to be able to teach you, to be able to get that level of knowledge, to be able to warn you not to go that route, but for you to essentially just go the route of spirit, and to just be able to walk in the spirit completely, to retain those certain things in your mind, just like how I've been talking about, meditating on Christ's commandments, the worksmen on the table, just making and etching the same old 5-pointed star on the cross, meditating regularly. I'm talking about in the moment, every single time, and to just be thinking about Christ's commandments and his teachings, and these things themselves, and be thinking ahead, because obviously you know yourself, right? What kind of sins you usually fall into, just stupid sins, and things that realistically could be 100% avoidable, but you don't bother looking forward, you don't bother looking and thinking ahead of time, and being like, well, I could do something about it right now, but I guess I'll just wait and see, and then I'll be able to really test the quality of my work. Don't be that dumb. You realistically need to prepare yourself a lot more than you think, because you're gonna end up falling flat on your face. You're betting 100% and on yourself and your own abilities, when realistically that isn't the gospel whatsoever. At any point, you need to be 100% dependent on Christ's grace, praying for his grace and deliverance, to be able to free you from those certain avoidable temptations and sins that are going to come inside of your life, that realistically nobody wants to get to it right away, because it's just like, well, I'll just get to it once I get to it. You realistically have to address those issues right away. You can't let fear just continue to grip you, because it's doing it on purpose. That devil, that spirit of fear, is just trying to get you, trying to hold you there until you actually finally do get tempted, and now it's so much easier, because you've done nothing to prepare for any of it. When has life taught you that it's all right to do, or when has life ever taught you to do anything like that? To just go blindly into these sort of tests, and regular, just common situations that happen in everyone's life. Never, I mean, to an extent, you even have some sort of advice to be able to teach you that You can't be doing that. It's like you need to go over there. You need to be able to be polite, respectful, courteous, whatever, and certain things like that. And this short, the overall premise that you need to be applying to the temptations that come inside of your life, to be meditating and thinking about these things ahead of time, and obviously be able to remember Christ's teachings and commandments, to be able to retain that sort of information, wise things, wisdom. Those are commandments in themselves because of the deliverance that comes from it. It's not just you whatever. These are just suggestions. It sounds good right now, but what about, what about when it actually does happen? Or what about the variations? What if it doesn't happen exactly like that? Obviously you need to knock it off, right? You just apply these things to what you need to apply them to, and that's it, because they're commandments of Christ. You don't have to get too all in depth. It's kind of similar to it. Just apply the commandment and whatever, keep it simple. Apply other commandments to your life as well, to be able to discern those certain things, to know that you're overcomplicating these things, and you just need to be able to choose the good path and the good way, good works, and goodness, and certain principles like that. But if you want to continue, deciding or judging righteously according to your own judgments and your own, intellect, you're gonna fall flat on your face. You have absolutely no, experience to be able to deal with these sort of situations in your life, to be able to know for certain that your judgment is going to be perfect every single time. That was the whole premise of me even telling you to be able to be that worksman on the table, etching that five-pointed star, one after another, grabbing a slate and doing that. That's because it would build itself into a habit to the point that it just becomes second nature, that you impulsively, obviously, obey Christ. And then from the experiences you get from, obeying Christ, you're going to be bearing fruit of, being able to know for certain why these are perfect judgments, and these judgments are perfect. And that's essentially, what I was actually able to see, the results that I seen from it. I was actually able to discern, that this is, obviously possible if I just continue, abiding in that way of thinking. If I continue just practicing that out and being like, what, yeah, this isn't just a one-time goal. I'll pray this in the morning. I need to constantly be thinking about these things on a regular basis, every single day of my life, as if my life depended on it, because of all the results and the fruits that come from it. I bear so much more fruits. I'm able to just think rationally, be able to be centered and be more Christ-like. But your efforts are going to determine how much or how many results you actually see, or even if you're even productive with the types of works and prayers that you essentially pray. And in your efforts, how much you apply yourselves, what you actually do with your time. Do you read the Bible often? Do you play games? Do you watch movies? Do you talk with the girls or your friends? Or it's just realistically certain things like that. You need to be able to let go of those things and be able to discern what's more important in your life. Obviously, this is 10 times more important than you going out to birthday dinners, or you doing certain things like that, to brunches, or to hanging out with your friends, to watch that that new movie that just came out. You realistically need to be able to detach yourself from that way of thinking, where you are realistically trying to be a people pleaser. Oh, they're gonna be mad if I don't go with them, and certain principles like that, and really be focused and centered on Christ's relationship, and being uh, sure that you are on good terms with Christ, you're reconciled with Christ, and this isn't a game for you whatsoever. Obviously, the consequence of what happens if you're not meeting up to Christ's standards, and doing certain things like that. Obviously, he's going to be mad at you. You want to use grace as a crutch while you continue, obviously, living in blatant sin. It's just not going to happen, in all honesty. You can expect a super relationship with Christ, where Christ is judge, and he's going to be judging you for all of your, acts of rebellion. Well, yes, obviously, these are very common principles for people to be able to understand. He's waiting for you with open arms if you actually do mess up. Obviously, his patience wears out eventually. If you're not doing a single thing about any of your actions, which is something that you need to be able to recognize, that you need to be thinking ahead. And if you're not doing a single thing about your destructive habits and how you actually are handling these certain situations that come inside of your life, that way of thinking and that mentality is not going to last at all whatsoever. Christ is obviously going to condemn you as well. He's going to think you're a fool. He's gonna condemn you as a fool, and he's gonna be like, well, where is this? He's gonna rebuke you in short, to be able to get that sort of reaction from you, for you to be able to recognize and realize how much of how foolish you've been, right? and how realistically you've just been wasting your time and not really making good use of your time for you to have this super relationship with Christ, and to be, seeing these good results in your life, to be able to, really, to really recognize, right, that the results that you see in your life are true and evident. This is very possible, and you need to continue, moving forward and, applying these certain principles to your life, as well as being able to be intellectually uh, wise and in wisdom is what I was trying to say. Trying to be intellectually wise. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that would be the whole premise on why you even are here on earth, right? Is for you to actually be Christ-like, because everyone is created under the same exact image of God. So all of us look like Him. It's not that He looks like us. All of us are made in His exact image. Our actions, our virtues, and what we tend to gravitate to, that are good works and naturally good works, or destructive works, are what essentially form our face. These are the hands that work the clay, right? That is our face, and that is our body, that is this, and that is that. Good habits obviously form, good qualities, good characteristics, and vice versa. Bad qualities, bad posture, that's pretty common. It's basic. We could all understand that our own decisions and our own actions determine how we essentially look like, how we destroy our bodies or how we don't. Alcohol, drunkenness, you get rebuked for all your iniquities. So there's not realistically anything that you could be focused on or centered in, uh, other than Christ's commandments, or to try to give a little place for the devil to be like, oh, this is all God's fault. Realistically, every single one of your whatever imperfections and other things like that has to do with your own actions. Christ is bringing these things to your attention, that how you think and how you react to certain things are destroying you, and you're not realistically able to really get it to that depth because you're not that spiritual. You don't recognize who was at the center of all of this, was really in control, and because of that, you just continue doing whatever you want to do, and you know, but be rational, right? Christ is rational, and pretty simple principles to be able to understand. For the most part, ancestral sins, generational curses, kids that are born deaf, born blind, born lame. That's where these things come into play. Ancestral sins are the reasons for these things. You can break them and, have faith, and cast these things out to make sure that they're not blind, deaf, or lame. But as for everything else that are in your genes, that is genetic wise, I'm sorry, I'm trying not to spit, that are in your sins, that are in your genes, that you're trying not to, I'm sorry, I was trying to do something, but I forgot midway. That you're essentially, these are the reasons why. It's for the generational curses and the sins of the fathers. The law of Moses is the main reason as to why you're being judged so severely and harshly. None of your family has ever obeyed at any point, and because of that, God isn't mocked for any one of these sins. God demands all of these sins to be paid and atoned for, and it gets to you, and then it gets to your children, and then it gets to them. It just continues on and on and on until finally somebody essentially just breaks these curses up for them, to be able to free your family, and future generations from the snares of the devil, and the suffrages that the devil has placed in your family tree on purpose, just to make you suffer. That's it. The devil doesn't care about you. He only gets the satisfaction from being able to torment you and torture you and rob you of your peace, because clearly they're all evil, right? Everybody recognizes that. To say that, Christ is a bad person in this situation is obviously his own manipulative tactics to be able to get you to, deviate yourself from God's ways. And for you to actually be able to get the help that you obviously receive if you believe, right? If you're a Christian, if you believe in the gospel, if you believe in Jesus Christ, everything else aside from that obviously has to do with the devil's own, how manipulative he is of certain situations to get the reaction, and the results he wants to see, to get you to be thrown into the lake of fire with him. That's it. Christ obviously does send him in your life to be able to test you. If you end up bombing those tests and falling flat on your face, obviously that's all on you. Your parents have raised you well. They taught you with good principles and morals, and for you to just go the whole left and the whole another direction, well, obviously it doesn't really reflect your parents' parenting on their end and on their part. It has nothing to deal with them. It has everything to do with your own rebellion and certain things like that. Your lack of fear and reverence for God and who His person actually is obviously also plays an enormous role in your lives. I knew who God was even as a teenager, but I just didn't, I didn't reverence Him as I should have. So I smoked weed. I did so many other different, types of sins and actions that was able to say I was, judged through that principle of self that I didn't fear God as I should have or as I do right now, right? Obviously, there's certain levels to that sort of fear. Unfortunately, you just don't get it right away. And certain people continue, living in sin and struggling. And because of that, they just continue, not being able to finally let go of certain sins when they could just cut it out immediately. But sadly, this has just been recurrent all of the history of mankind, and this is just how, in short, it actually has turned out to be, and this is how essentially it is. The lack of knowledge, ignorance. People just didn't know what was actually happening, what was causing these issues and problems. Not that you actually do know, you have every means and ability to be able to, get rid of these things and to be able to see those certain results. That way you're not, consistently, going into suffrages and torments that are just causing you so much, hurt, pain, and suffrage. But it's still going to be on your own, action. You can't have a lack of action and want all of these results. Christ obviously is going to require that you actually do something about it because laziness is a sin. It's just something that you need to be able to discern, right? You can't just, throw your hands up in the air, be like, I put it in your hands, Lord, and then expect this paycheck to come in every single week. That's just not going to happen with Christ. Work 100% is going to teach you, the paycheck is going to teach you what these results are going to get you, and what this actual efforts are going to get you. You can't expect a whole week's pay if you miss every single day, right? So you can't expect to see these sort of sinless results, or, of you not actually dealing with certain sins, if you're not being that worksman on the table, etching that same old, 5-pointed star repeatedly on a regular basis, that's just not going to happen in all honesty. And so you need to carry that same exact principle to that, to the worksman on the table, because it's just not going to happen without it in all honesty. It's going to teach you a lot as well, that is all heavily dependent on you and your own applications and actions and efforts. While yes, certain curses and demonic presences are going to hinder you from being able to see certain results, you can just deliver yourselves and you could be able to see those results in a lot quicker. You're going to be working a lot more efficiently and smarter instead of working harder and trying to realistically really get it embedded in your head after so many times that you've read certain scriptures, and then you still continue, failing and falling flat on your face. These things are pretty sad in all honesty, because you aren't realistically able to really understand at that level why you're essentially going through so much suffering and so much pain. And it's just because of your own way of thinking and your own mentality, and that's why you just continue, living that way of thinking and just expecting to actually be able to see results that you are not even working towards. When do you expect to get abs if you don't even bother working out and all you eat is junk food? In all honesty, when you want these abs, that's not going to happen, buddy. You're gonna obviously have to work to an extent. Same with with jobs. You expect a full week's pay when you haven't even went to work once. Why? I mean, you don't even bother doing that with certain principles in the real world, but yet you still expect these sort of results. As a Christian, right? To be able to go to heaven, to be able to see Jesus in your dreams and do certain things like that, when none of you are willing to actually let go of certain sins, and these things are pretty sad in themselves, that you think that you can work it out with Christ, like you can put these things on layaway, and Christ doesn't operate like that whatsoever. He wants you to let these go all at the door, right? And he wants you to actually take the leap of faith that if you do let it go, everything is going to be fine, because the gospel is 100% and completely faith-based. And to you, you just don't equate those certain things to your life. You're just like, well, Christ is going to be working, with me through this whole time. It's not even working like that whatsoever for you, in all honesty. Christ is using real grace to not throw you into hell for living like that. And you think that Christ is actually using grace to be able to work with you and work through you. as it's just not happening. You're using grace as a license to sin, and you're still being judged for, the sins that you're struggling with, and that's something that you don't realistically really recognize either, because you're, spiritually inexperienced to be able to discern what is realistically happening to you in that life, or in that moment of life, rather, I was trying to say. And because of that, you know, you just continue just living this sort of lifestyle, expecting to actually be able to, uh, not expecting, thinking that Christ himself is actually working, through you. And in all reality, he's just trying not to throw you into hell, and he's using grace as a means to be able to, preserve you and keep you up here on earth. But then when it's your time to go, it's your time to go. In all honesty, if you end up going and getting into a car accident and you end up dying, you're gonna go straight to hell because you're struggling. That's something that you also need to quit immediately, and justifying yourself so much about these, destructive habits that are going to clearly destroy you, and cause you to go into hell. Failing to actually be that worksman on the table is a sin. Every uh, every Christian is called to live by that principle now, because they were ignorant in the past, and because they were ignorant, God winked at these things. But now that you aren't ignorant, you obviously have to, man up and muster that courage and strength to be able to apply all of that wisdom uh, onto that principle itself, or die. And that's realistically the real, that's what it boils down to, in all honesty. If I sugarcoat these things too much for you, you'll never change. You'll be too comfortable in this, the struggle way of thinking, and I'll just do this, and then Christ is still going to be helping me out. In all reality, Christ is going to send you off into a delusional state, and you're going to be thinking that you're actually speaking with Christ. In reality, he's infuriated with you. Then he's going to tell me, make this video again, to be able to, really get my point across with these people, to let them know that I'm not playing with them, and let them know that these individuals are clearly delusional and they need more help than they think. I'm just going to be like, okay, I have to tell them this. And then these things happen just like how it just happened right now. And, sadly, many individuals still not even bother waking up. They're just like, well, I believe that God is so good, he wouldn't do anything like that. You have to cut it out, and reread the scriptures to be able to discern, what has he done in the past and what will he do in the future if God doesn't change. And, it's realistically that simple, but people just refuse to believe it, because then that means that they realistically do have to change, and they have to change immediately and right away. Like I mentioned before, with my own testimony of struggling with certain sins, struggling with fornication and lust, and smoking weed, and doing certain things like that, and drinking. Yeah, I immediately got on my knees, right? Because I was terrified, and I was scared of, actually going to hell, because I knew that that message was for me. And even if it wasn't for me, I applied it to myself, because it's better to be safe than sorry. And, I went on that 2 day fast, and then I went on, I ate, and then I went on another 2 day fast. And then, I was finally delivered from nicotine and that cigarette smoking, to the point that obviously it made me want to gag when I just inhaled. I didn't drink for like another year or 2 years, until Christ revealed it to me, that fearing liquor and fearing drunkenness is a sin, just as much as drunkenness is. And I was like, oh. I was like, well, you're right. It's because you're not fearing the Lord. And I was like, okay. So, there's a lot of Christians that, are in fear of alcohol. But in reality, they need to be in fear of the Lord. It's completely fine for you to actually drink, to drink and with your food, and do things like that. And drunkenness, excessive drinking, binge drinking, doing certain things like that, obviously has to deal with sins and iniquities of the hearts. And drinking every weekend, drinking to get drunk, these are sins in themselves. And yeah, and but he didn't want me at all being afraid of liquor or certain things like that. Smoking is 100% a sin. He doesn't want you being afraid of marijuana, but just because of the fact that, the smoking is a sin, eating marijuana is a sin, the edibles or whatever the case may be, they're just sins. It's pretty simple, right? It's pretty basic to be able to understand. I'm not speaking, some sort of hidden language that nobody knows or understands. These are just common principles that we could all apply to. That you don't want to apply them to your life, it's another story entirely, because you refuse to believe that these things are actually true, or you just don't want to see it like that. It's not gonna happen, you know. You're not going to see these sort of results. Expect to be this Christian where this, Christ actually use you. He's going to use you, but it's not going to be for any good reasons whatsoever. He's going to use you to make a fool out of you. Everybody's going to be like, oh, wow, yeah, I don't want to be like that kid or that guy. And that's it. He uses everyone. So please get very, comfortable with that. And please get very, understanding of that as well. That he uses everyone for good or for bad reasons. For individuals to be able to fear the Lord. Oh, you see this guy? This is what happens when you don't work every single day. All of a sudden people are just like, okay, I'm going to work every day. Or you see this guy? This is what happens if you just worship all the time. It's like, okay, I don't want to just worship all the time. I have to do other things as well. So there's two sides to every coin, right? You exhaust yourself like, yeah, I'm like this super person, but then Christ is quick to abase. So please be able to discern that, and please be able to recognize that as well. That's just something that Christ himself just does on a regular basis, because it exhausts his person. It's who he actually is, and then it shows who you actually are. Volatile of, all independency. You can't do a single thing by yourself or without Christ. So I'm breaking these curses up because this is the reasons why you're not able to process this sort of information or actually see certain results like that when you actually are in the Bible. You're more in the scriptures than I am. You go to church, and these are in short, the reasons why you're too afraid to actually engage yourself in spiritual warfare. Because you're scared. You're afraid of the retaliation. Retaliation is there, buddy, so you might as well just fight. I'm breaking these curses up. That way you actually are able to be bold, courageous, fearless. Oh man, what's the other word? What were they talking about earlier? Oh, the lack of intellect, or you're not actually able to process this sort of information because you can't put, two and two together. Yeah, those are curses. They're actually placed there on purpose by, demonic presences and activities through temptations, to be able to get those sort of results. I mean, it's pretty basic and simple to be able to understand. I know I'm saying that a lot, but these things are realistically that simple. I mean, I'm not speaking rocket science things or terms or whatever. I'm obviously saying these things to be able to, reach your ears. But now you're actually able to apply these sort of principles of breaking these curses up to the areas that you need to be applying them to in your mind, how you actually are not processing information. It works for college as well. I mean, that's something that I was basically, getting familiar with, that these things work for just learning abilities. You're not actually being able to learn as quickly or as rapidly as the next person or someone who's actually excelling in your class. All have to deal with, a mental issue and generational curses, ancestral sins, your own temptations that you fall into. So it's like your own fault. And, certain things like that for people to be able to really advance or actually just pass their class, right? These are just curses of the mind. I don't want to help everyone out just because of the fact that it means that they're not going to be saved. They're going to end up going to hell. So obviously I want these individuals to really, to get saved first and prioritize that, and then I'll be able to help them out. It's completely pointless for me to actually be able to get you to excel in college just for you to go to hell. Well, how does that make sense to anyone? Obviously, what needs to be prioritized firstly, salvation, doing everything that Christ himself wants you to do. The secular world has a better, image, or they already know what Christ is going to require from them. But because of the pastors that are shepherding those sheep and those congregations, and they sugarcoat it, they make it seem like it's so easy and so simple. You don't even have to work. It's all by grace, brother, and other things like that. They're just completely just stupid, and you just have to apply common sense to be able to snap from the little spell that they're putting you under. But that's something that's very frowned upon and condemned in the Christian community, is to apply common sense, or it seems like it, because nobody does it. But yeah. So I'm breaking these curses up in your mind, obviously, right? Because they get to your mind. Well, they get to your heart by getting to your mind first. First, you have to actually hear these sort of temptations for it to affect your heart, right? And then if you actually end up falling for these certain sins and temptations, then it's a heart issue. It has to deal with, how you react to things, how you think, your attitudes and approaches, and your overall character. And from all these things themselves, it just stems from much more problems. It affects your outward appearance as much as your soul, right? Pretty common, pretty basic to be able to understand, but you know, there's still going to be people that don't want to admit those certain things. All of it has to be grace somehow, and none of it has to deal with any real, action. That's another curse. And how they're not actually able to process certain things like that, certain biblical foundations and principles. Those are curses in themselves that are deliberately placed there to be able to just hinder them and stop them completely from advancing and growing and maturing in Christ. I mean, strategically, I would do that, right? To the kingdom of darkness, but they're doing it to the kingdom of light. And from a strategic standpoint, all of it has to deal with destroying the relationship with Christ and destroying the holiness with Christ. To be able to completely separate man and God through holiness and lack of holiness. That's just what they do. But if you think it's all easy and it's all by grace, then obviously going to deceive you because you're not realistically going to hold yourselves accountable for your actions. You're gonna think that somehow there's this and that and whatever. I mean, I don't want you living in fear of certain things. That Christ somehow is not going to be expecting you with open arms. I mean, that would be a false gospel. But obviously, be able to recognize how holy God actually is, and what are the what is going to be the end result for your actions. It's not going to be good if you don't repent, if you don't actually, show works meet for repentance. So you obviously do need a complete change of heart and 100% 180 from that, way of thinking and that whole lifestyle itself. So yeah, I'm going to ask Christ. He says that you need to be applying that to your life. The worksman on the table principle, because it's a commandment and because you need to be able to recognize the fruits that come from it, as well as the experience that's going to be able to teach you that is Christ's path, and that's what he wants you to do for the rest of the time that you have here on earth until Christ returns. You need to be applying that diligently to your lives. You must show all the efforts that you possibly can because he already knows what you're capable of. You can't, expect to cheat him and not, pay the consequences for it. You will have to pay for that way of thinking as well. You can't cheat God. No one can cheat God. You need to be given to God what he obviously knows you're able to give him and nothing less. It'll be the same as like principle as Ananias and Sapphira, how, they attempted to hold back and, the money. It wouldn't even have made a difference if they actually had told them that, yeah, we held back some of the money because we wanted it. But it's because they lied to God. And they said that they actually did give all the money is the reason why they felt dead. So had they actually have been honest, it would actually have preserved their lives. It's God is understanding. He's able to recognize that yes, it's like you held back some of the money because you're poor and this is fine. The whole point of Christianity in itself is charity and compassion and being nice to one another to be able to help them out. But they obviously lied to God and they ended up paying the consequences for it. Excuse me. I have to sneeze, but I don't want to sneeze. True. Yeah. So I'm gonna ask the Holy Ghost what else he wants to say. He says, yeah, you're gonna have to honestly fight. You're gonna have to deliver yourselves, or you're not gonna be able to see any of these results that you actually want to see. Deliverance is gonna make it a lot more easier for you to actually be able to, be holy, to actually be able to be that worksman on the table, to not be so arrogant, to not be so overly confident in your own abilities, but being confident on your own dependency on Christ, because that's the only thing you realistically can be confident in, how not independent you are. John 15 condemns you. It says that you need to be abiding in the vine at all times. And if you don't abide in the vine, what ends up happening is a sin that automatically needs to be equated in your mind and your way of thinking. How you essentially function and view things all has to be Christ oriented. And what would Christ do in these certain situations? Centered. That's realistically it. If you're having any trouble to be able to, really apply those certain principles to your lifestyle, again, you're cursed. You're extremely cursed, right? You have so many curses in your lifestyle, and in your lives that are preventing you from being able to be a functioning, Christian and citizen of heaven. Not that it matters that you're a functioning member of society. The society is dead. All that matters is that you actually are a functioning citizen of heaven. So yeah, I'm breaking all these curses up because this is, it's easy. I can do it. Anyone can do it. The more faith you have, the better. Uh, and yeah, now casting these devils out by the legion. Now you actually are able to really live this principle out and this way of thinking out. And then I'm still going to be loosing blessings in your life, in your mind, your heart, your soul, your will, and your emotions to be able to process, information better, and to actually be able to equate certain things, because many of you people are not actually able to recognize what Christ was even implying, or that you should even be applying what he was implying, because he didn't directly say it. I mean, this is just how, the human mind essentially works. If I don't have the words to be able to pray these certain prayers, I'll just wait. In reality, you could just pray through most of different words. If Christ didn't say it specifically or address it specifically, then you know what, I had to just, rely on my own common sense, or rely on my own this and that. There's so many other implications in the Bible that are just, that imply more commandments, but because you don't actually want to view it like that, and you need to hear it in that format of Christ commanding these things, instead of you just, applying common sense and being rational about it. Maybe I shouldn't do something bad because it's bad. You're going to continue living that way of thinking. You're cursed. That's a curse in itself. So yeah, now I'm losing, spiritual gifts and gifts in general, to be able to be a quick learner, to be able to be sharp, to be able to, have discernment. What else? To be able to to be able to be quick to listen, to be able to be eager to do good works. These are all gifts in themselves. To be able to, want to obey God more. These are all, spiritual blessings, gifts, virtues, and what is that word? Morality, moral uprightness, I guess. And things like that. And that's just realistically at the level that these things should be operating in your minds from now on. That everything and anything that is going to cause you to be a more efficient human being and a more efficient Christian, to be able to understand the scriptures a lot better, the gospel itself a lot better. All these things have to do with, gifts, blessings of the mind, how you essentially are processing these things, and the devils that attempt to stop you from being able to process this information at the level that you need to be processing it. Don't sell yourself short, especially if you're a lot more intelligent than you think, or a lot more intelligent than you are, rather. That's what I meant to say. Some of you are a lot more intelligent, but you just don't apply those certain street smarts to the Bible, to scriptures themselves. Some of you are a lot more intelligent than what, how you essentially carry yourselves as a Christian. And that's just the overall premise of just applying common sense to your Christian walk. People think that you have to be a super good person, washing the dishes extra good. You like this, Jesus? When in reality, how do the angels actually function? They just function normally. They're able to interact with you like normal, beings, without any of the overly goodness of good. So yeah. Just be normal, be yourselves. You have your characters, right? Anything that has to deal with you is you. It's the sins that need to be purged out and need to be refined out of your life for you to be able to recognize. This is why certain sins just hurt so much. In all honesty, is able to help you to finally let go of the certain destructive habits that are causing you so much trouble and drama, laziness and homelessness. That's the easiest example that I could just put. It sucks to be homeless. That is, in short, able to really, put the pep to your step and kick you in the right direction forward, for you to ensure that you don't remain lazy because you're going to be homeless. It's simple, right? But it applies to so many other different spiritual aspects of your life that you aren't realistically able to discern it at that level just yet because you're still doing it. Until you realistically are able to stop justifying yourself, like how I mentioned in the beginning of the video, to allow for room for growth and change, it's just not gonna happen, sadly. You're just gonna continue justifying yourself, doing all kinds of things, and being like, well, whatever, I'll just wait for Christ to really open my eyes. It's just not gonna happen like that. You're gonna read the same old scriptures, and they're going to continue going over your head. You're gonna be doing so many other different, of the common ways of life that you just continue, your daily routines, what I was trying to say. And nothing, you're not even going to notice all the sins and the damage that you essentially are doing to your life. When you work out a specific part of your body, like your abs, what is going to happen? You're obviously going to get abs, right? Or running or cardio or whatever. You can't expect to, it's the same as like principle. You're going to be working out that aspect of your life and reaping all the benefits from it. By benefits, I obviously mean all, the worst of the worst. These destructive habits you're going to be essentially reaping, back through poor posture, through no abs, through no motivation, through laziness. Think ahead, right? Sorry, my nose is like stuffy. I got like allergies or something. That's a curse. Allergies are 100% a curse, a generational curse for sure, an ancestral curse. I already know these things to be at that extent and at that level. But you want to continue justifying it? Let me take some more pills. That's not going to happen. In all honesty, you need to address the spiritual side of these things to be able to be freed. Can you imagine? Oh, let me just get surgery to the blind guy with the pull-side loan. Imagine if Christ said that to him. Oh yeah, hold on, I got $3,000 right here. We can get you that LASIK surgery right away. So what are you doing? It's like you could obviously do these. These all have to do with spiritual issues and problems. So we have the technology now to be able to heal people. Is another thing entirely. You have all the power in the world to be able to do these things, and for you to just rely on technology itself to be able to free yourself from allergies or what's another one? Migraines, headaches. There's a demon that is hitting you with a hammer on your head, and that's why you have headaches and migraines, in case you didn't know. Or what else? Anger. There's a devil that is stirring up your heart. Laziness. There's a devil trying to put you in a trance to hold you there for as long as possible. To try to get it, make it sound nice that you should, lay in bed for another 5 minutes. That's all it is. Insomnia. Another devil that is just trying to keep you up all night. He's trying to distract you from realistically being able to finally focus on being able to sleep. That's what insomnia is. Your lack of focusing on trying to sleep. Sad. Allergies. Genetic curses. Obviously generational curses because you pass down your genes to your kids. Common. It's just simple, man. It's like people overcomplicate these things because it's just like I'm too afraid to admit some of these things. It's like, man, I just admit it or I pray about it to Christ. Some of these things are going to be obvious once you realistically are able to really get that sort of revelation to know for certain that what you actually have been revealed is truth. What was revealed to you is true. And then again, you could lose these mysteries in your vessel, in your mind, your heart, your soul, your will, and your emotions. And then at a later time, I already have been able to, witness that with my own eyes. I would lose these certain mysteries in my vessel. I don't know what I'm talking about. And by I already have an idea, then finally I'm actually able to articulate these things. Say, oh wow, that actually does work. This is how I get certain videos out, is just because of certain things like that. I know that's what I was doing in 2021. And man, that was crazy. I was losing those mysteries in my vessel, and all of a sudden I was finally able to articulate certain things on what I was actually experiencing in my life. And that was the real catalyst to be able to propel me forward, to repeatedly and consistently do that, to lose mysteries in my vessel. Who else is talking for an hour long every single day or every other day? Do these people even have that much knowledge to be able to get it to that extent? That's just sad. In all honesty, you just hear the same old messages of grace and, I'm just glad we could all hug each other and do certain things like that. Anyway, that's not the message of the days of Elijah. And that's also something that I noticed as well. What Christ ends up doing, he completely steers, my whole sorry, he's doing it right now. I'm going to say something. He's trying to give me. Oh, I think I should say something correctly, and then he just stirs it another direction to be able to get the sort of message he actually wanted out to begin with, to be able to really impart grace, for people to be able to understand these certain things, because it's just how people are going to get it. I'm just like, oh, I see. That was way, he said it a lot, cleaner and a lot better than what I actually had to say it in or as. Other things is whatever you think you can. Type of stuff. So yeah, my nose is like really stuffy. I feel stuffy. Still, just continue, plowing through with your faith. I'm sure that's why Christ is even doing it to begin with, to be able to get that sort of message out. Is the fact that some of you just don't really follow through with faith, to have more faith, to pray for more faith. You may think you have faith to be able to actually deliver yourselves in certain aspects, but then you try to actually do it, and then you don't see any of the results that you actually want to see. It's the lack of faith and presumption. So yeah, faith, mercy, love, joy, peace, the fruits of the Holy Ghost. And yeah, that about wraps it up. I'm gonna ask Christ what else he wants to say. Also, this room is hot, so it like naturally makes my nose congested. Not that I have a big nose or anything. So yeah, thank you for listening. Hopefully you're actually able to really think ahead and really apply your own wisdom that Christ himself has already been forming and putting in your life to be able to teach you how you need to be able to function for his kingdom, how you should be serving him, the whole servanthood process of it all. And certain things like that. And I'm sure he obviously wants you to be able to recognize that everybody has a work to do. I can't do your work, you can't do mine. So get to work. And yeah, that about wraps it up. In short. Thank you, love you, bye.